Welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast, the show where aspiring and experienced matchmakers come to sharpen their skills, grow their businesses, and elevate the matchmaking industry. Your host is ARLENE WashBURN, an award-winning ethical matchmaking advocate, mentor, and industry innovator. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast, everyone, where we have real conversations to elevate the matchmaking industry and protect the people we serve. And today's episode is different and deeply important. We're diving into a story that may be hard for you to hear, but it's one every matchmaker and dater needs to understand. My guest is Debby Montgomery Johnson, a former U.S. Air Force officer, successful businesswoman, and widow who found herself in a 2-year online relationship with someone she never met and who ultimately scammed her out of $1 million. Debby's story is not about shame, it's about resilience, courage, and advocacy. And she now is known as the woman behind the smile, and she's made it her mission to educate others about romance scams and manipulation online and the people that you meet. And Debby, thank you so much for being here and for your bravery and speaking out. To start us off, can you take us back to 2010? What was going on in your life and where you met this individual and all the things that ensued?
Well, it goes back to April 8th, 2010, and I got a phone call. I call it the call. It came from my oldest son. I was actually working. I was treasurer for the school district in Palm Beach County, and I was at a meeting. I had my phone turned off, and when I went to break, I got this message from my son, along with probably 25 other messages. And my son essentially said, "Mom, Dad just died. I'm coming home to take care of everything." Well, my husband had left the night before to go to the west coast of Florida to do some business, and I basically just said, "Hey, I'll see you tomorrow." He was not ill. When he got over to the west coast of Florida, he woke up that morning and looked at someone and said, "Here are my car keys, put my stuff in my truck. I'm having a heart attack, call 911.
Oh my gosh.
And he was dead within 30 minutes. And so my son got the call. I'm not even sure how that happened, how he heard first. And so that threw me. I mean, you can imagine, I wasn't planning on him leaving the house and never seeing him again. And so I had to run his company, which I didn't know anything about. I still had my job. I have 4 children, and only one was still at home. He was 15. The others were I have 2 military sons, and they were in flight school. My daughter was out in college. So I was home alone, and I have a lot of friends, but I had to figure out how to run the company. And that was my emphasis of my life for the next 6 months, was how do I keep the company going and how do I keep my own job, And so I did that until about 6 months in, and my girlfriends kept saying, "You need a life, you need a life." Well, they wanted me to get out there and start dating again. And I was 52 at the time. And I just, all those anxieties, and I'm sure you've heard this with your clients, the anxieties of not being skinny enough, not being smart enough, not being anything enough, which was absolutely ridiculous because I'd had a really good career and I'd done well. And at the time, after Lou died, I actually got down very skinny. And all my life mental, you go back to a teenager when you're heavy and weren't skinny enough, weren't, all these things. And I had actually not taken good care of myself, really. After Lou died, I was swimming, and that was my one outlet. But I figured, well, I'm going to get really skinny now, and I wasn't eating. And one of Lou's best friends, who I absolutely adored, was a pilot for Continental, and he came into town and he goes, "You look terrible. You look so gaunt." And I was like, "Well, I'm darned if I do and darned if I don't, And I finally said, "Would y'all just leave me alone?" So my girlfriends said, "Get a life, get back into dating." And I didn't want to do it in person. I'd been married 26 years. I wasn't ready to have something in person yet. I just wasn't mentally ready for that. And they said, "Let's just try online. It's safe." I'm like, okay, I can, do it from the comfort of my home. And I went on to faith-based dating sites thinking that those would be safe. and it went from there. And the reason I did it actually was because my mom, who at the time was, well, 90, probably in her late 70s, early 80s, she had a girlfriend who had met her husband online. So I figured, well, if the 80-year-old can do it safely, so can I. And she was my greatest supporter. My brothers, not so much. My sister-in-laws they thought it was an interesting concept. My brothers were, oh my gosh, you need a background check and you need all these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, fellas, it's just dating. And so I basically ignored them and took the support of my sister-in-laws. My kids were kind of mixed emotions, but I'm like, let me just try it. Let me just try it. And that's how it started. And it started on a faith-based site because I'd seen, again, I was 52 and I was looking for guys between 55 and 65. And they were coming up with wife beater t-shirts, those no sleeve t-shirts.
Bathroom photos.
Nothing wrong with that, but it just wasn't for me because my husband was brilliant. And, and we were both former officers in the Air Force. And so I was looking for someone that was a business person or someone international. And that's what I got, actually. Once I got past the guys that couldn't spell worth a fifth grader, and so I think I saw the picture. I can't remember who contacted who, but anyway, it was a lovely contact. He was international, and it was a guy who had lost his wife, and it just seemed like it was a really good mix for me because as I was talking or getting in contact with people at the time, I found the fellas that were divorced seemed to have a little more baggage, is what I would call it. I wasn't ready for that because my life had been pretty good. Like I said, I'd been married for a long time, and I just wanted someone that I could talk to. I wasn't really looking for, like I said, an in-person thing. I wanted someone to talk to and just talk about my company because it wasn't my company, it was my husband's company, and it was all about diabetes and neuropathy and things that I didn't have, but Lou did, and it's taken me 10 years to figure out that it was my own it's my company now, but back then it was very difficult. So I wanted someone that I could talk business with. I wanted someone I could talk love and kids about. And that originally was a little exciting because it was all those endorphins and the hormones that were kicking in again after all those years. Was frightening, but at the same time exciting.
And the interesting thing is that's exactly how they groom you, is that they know there's a whole psychological component where these hormones are released and they hijack your amygdala and you're no longer thinking the way a normal person thinks. You're almost like a drug addict,
Well, exactly, but nobody tells you that. I mean, this was 2010, and I had never heard of anybody being taken online like that ever. I mean, everybody I talked to, they'd met their significant other, they'd had really good experiences. And so when that happens, and again, I'm coming from a Air Force intelligence background and business background, and the only thing that stopped me a little bit in my tracks was that the very first email that I got from him at the end, it says, "You can call me Eric Cole." And I thought that was a really weird way of saying my name is.
right.
So I asked him about that, and he goes, "Oh, it's Franca Lingua, and it's we're European." And at that point, I'm like, "Well, okay, sounds good to me." But when I found out where he worked, because the story was he was in Houston, and he was doing some work he was an independent contractor. He had hardwood trees. He was working with hardwood trees, which, unbeknownst to him, I had investments in trees in Costa Rica. One of those things my husband did. I never told him about that. But when he was telling me about the company that he was a contractor for, I looked him up. I actually called them and said, "Do you have a contractor named Eric Cole from London?" And they said no. And when I asked him about it, he said, "Well, I don't work directly for them. I'm independent," which made sense that he wouldn't be on their website. And I did that throughout. I was very good about trying to verify, but he always had a reason why something didn't get confirmed. always had a plausible reason. And I had no idea that I would be lied to, that anybody would do that. Why would you be doing that? We're
Exactly. And not everyone is as brave as you. I mean, first of all, thank you for your service,
you're
because my sister
very
was
welcome.
in the military. But the bravery to speak out about this, there are so many people who go through these experiences and never talk about it because of they feel shame. They feel, when they go through a lot of money that perhaps belonged to their kids. I mean, I was just telling Jason that there was a woman on one of the shows who actually committed suicide
Yeah.
because she had, and there's a lot of men that also go through this as well. And it's just amazing how good they are at grooming you and putting you through a process to get you to this point. And an unsuspecting good person would never think that this is happening.
Right. And it's not a he that's doing it, it's organized crime. And
Correct.
I don't like to actually call people that have been taken victims. They've been expertly manipulated by very well trained, smart individuals who work in huge groups in all
Mhm.
around the world. At the time, primarily in Nigeria and Ghana and Southern Africa, but they're in India, they're in America, they're everywhere now, and they are well trained. Now, I always say, if they could do for good what they do for bad, they'd be phenomenal,
Amazing. Yeah.
because they're educated, they're university educated men and women. It's actually a family thing in many cultures now. Because if you think about it, the stories that are being created, and there's more than just the individual that has been taken financially, it's their whole family. This is a family crime
Mm.
because of impersonation too, because all the pictures that are being used, those people behind the pictures are real people. And now their lives are being upended, because if you think about it, the man or woman whose picture is being used by the scammer or the criminal, that's a real person, and now their families are being contacted. Like I've interviewed some of the guys who've had their picture stolen for this, and their wives are being called by women saying, you're having an affair with my husband, or I'm having an affair with your husband, and he's taking all my money, and the wives and the kids are like, what?
What's
You know,
going on?
so it's ruining families, it's ruining villages, really, because uh, you know, I've had folks where I've had to take them to the bank, and they've had to go to the police station. And the the law enforcement is getting a little bit better, but local police have no idea what to do. And so when they hear this happens, although I'm taking the person to the law enforcement to get a report only,
Mm-hmm.
the cops can never get your money back, but they can give you a report, which you can take to the bank and show the bank that you were taken in a financial crime, and don't just freeze the accounts and do these things that are going to set you back even further. Another reason to get the report is, in some states you might be able to get some sort of therapy assistance or rent assistance or some sort
Interesting.
of a good assistance, where otherwise they're going to say, oh my gosh, I had one woman that was on government assistance here in the state of Florida, and she received a check from the state of Arizona. It was some other woman's Medicare check.
Mm-hmm.
She was instructed by the criminals to go to her bank, withdraw that money, put it into Bitcoin, send it out. Well, she did that because she was helping her friend.
Wire fraud.
Well, now she's taken in extra money, and it put her own assistance at risk, because she had this huge deposit into her account. Now the state of Arizona wants the money back. Now her bank wants the money back, and she doesn't have it.
Ugh,
It's just it's so insidious, and
so insidious.
it's so hurtful. And everybody that goes through it, besides the embarrassment and just the shame of the whole thing, because it's very smart,
Mm.
financially savvy men and women that are being taken. They might lose their licenses if they're financial advisors. They might lose. We don't know what they're going to lose, but all of them have lost their sense of control, their sense of worth. And they don't need the victim blame from anybody else, because they're blaming themselves enough. But we get
Exactly.
it. We get it from everybody. We get it from friends and family, which are the hardest, because that really hurts your heart. You get it from law enforcement. You get it from TV. You get it from wherever. It's a form of PTSD at that point. I mean, because you like you said earlier, we're expertly manipulated, and I hated that word when the FBI told me that, but that's what it is. You are expertly groomed, and it is that amygdala hijack, and you don't understand it because you're just so overwhelmed with feeling good endorphins
Yeah,
until it comes crashing and burning.
exactly. I mean, I think that it's, first of all, I know we were just talking about we don't like the word victim, but something's being done to these people. It's not like you're dumb and you don't know what, like you're in a state that you almost don't even have control over. They're controlling and they isolate you. They take, they start to build you up. They start, I mean, there's so many signs when you're dealing with people like that. They start immediately using terms of endearment in a very, very quick time. I mean, I would love to hear in your experience, what were the things that now that you look back, you're like, oh, these were flags, but not knowing and being trusting and having confidence too, because the thing is they go after confident people, like a ex-military person, with your background. You're confident, you're like, nothing's what's going to happen, nothing's going to happen, right? You're going into this online dating space, and by the way, I met my husband that way. It works for some people, but like, well, that was a long time ago. I think things have changed, but anyway, what started to happen, and how did we get to the point where we're now sending money and things like that?
Well, they're very good at listening, and that's the thing that I think most of us have had trouble with in the past is with a spouse or whoever, especially if you've been married for a long time.
Yeah.
I had a friend who's a social worker, and after Lou died, she sat me down. She goes, "You have to talk to me. You have to get out your emotions." And she really, if you look at a piece of Swiss cheese and the holes that are in Swiss cheese, she said that's what I was really like emotionally, is that I felt like I hadn't been listened to in many ways for all those years,
Yeah.
which was certainly true. And even though I was quite independent, I don't feel like I was listened to.
Mm-hmm.
And so guess what? My charming knight in white,
Fill that
white
hole.
horse does. For hours and hours and hours, he listened to me, and he filled me up. I felt pretty. I felt smart. I felt valuable because we talked about business. We talked about kids. We talked about how his wife passed away. We had so many things, quote unquote, in common. And so in all those hours, I wasn't thinking that, I knew he was overseas, but I wasn't thinking that he was in the middle of the night spending all these hours with me. And why wasn't he working? you know,
Right.
because in my mind, it was middle of the night for me too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a feel good thing at that point. And I got a lot out. If any, it's kind of expensive therapy, but it was really good therapy because I was able to express so much more. And for me, it was in writing. It was on Yahoo Chat. I could get a lot of my emotions out, a lot of Lou dying, those feelings I got out in writing. And he would feed it back. He would send me songs, and I'd be listening to these wonderful songs. And like together we'd be listening to songs, or he would send me poems, or we would write for hours. And on Yahoo Chat, it was like instant messaging. I wasn't ever on texting or Skype or anything like that, but it was the instant message. And then when we got disconnected, which was a red flag too, there was always an explanation. Like, I'm in Malaysia, I'm in so and so, and the internet's not good. And I would say, and I got to know no, quote unquote, no air nose, air quotes. I got to know his sister and his son and his attorney. I mean, it was multiple people, and that's why I say, it's not just one person. It's a group. They're trained in groups to do this. And there was one night when I type really quickly. I had 3 Yahoo chats open, and I was going in between his sister and son in London, and him in Malaysia, and attorney at one point. And the stories were going back and forth, and I was trying to learn from Mary, his sister, about him, and about her from him. And, the Kenny would Ken on, and I could literally hear this young, like 10-year-old, however old he was. The tone of the conversation changed. And so they draw you in for me, family meant everything. And so that I was being drawn into their family and drawn into their business things. And, the money didn't come quickly. The first small amount was really, Deb, I have a friend and he's trying to get onto the dating site and he can't. Would you send a check into the dating site? I'm like, sure, because I'd just gone through this. It was a literal check. I'd just gone through this. Ugh, the guys here are ridiculous. There aren't enough really good men. So I'm thinking, well, if he's a good guy, then I'll get his friend in. Silly me, because now I've just have qualified a criminal on the dating site by sending in a check, making it a paid person. The next little bit of money, again, because I felt like he was becoming family, and it happens very quickly that your emotions are really drawn to them. And the more we talked about kids and family and all, we then talked about our futures together. Now we were family. And that's how I think I really got drawn in, was because I would do in the past, I would do anything for my family. Right. And now he was part of the family. The finances helped me with my company here. And as a business owner, I knew this too, that not always do you get paid for your job until it's completed. Mm-hmm. So his job wasn't done yet. When it was going to be finished, he was going to get the money. Then he was going to send it back here or bring it back here, and we'd live a great life together. And so I was always in the mode of, well, let me help him now because it will come back to me. And that was always the assurance. I will make sure I pay you back. The only time I really got a little bit worried about that promise was when I was dealing with my 401k and some of my retirement accounts, because there are penalties. If you don't get the money back, you get penalized. And I think my innate fear was fear of being that bag lady at the end of my life, right? Mm-hmm. That goes back to, I've always wanted to pay my bills and always was very careful with money. My husband was a little bit looser with it. And the worst part one of the worst parts about Lou dying is I found out that he had canceled his life insurance policy 2 months before he died.
Oh my God.
And he did it strictly because he was aging into another age bracket, and it was going to cost him, instead of $100 a month, it would be $500 a month, and he didn't want to pay it. And so
you lost your life insurance policy, and now you're giving away all your money, and
was probably a blessing I didn't get the life insurance policy. Maybe I might have lost that too. I don't know. But that was definitely
look at it.
It's the only way I can look at it.
Oh my.
But I really make sure that, when a friend has died or whatever, I said to the next spouse, I'm like, be really careful, you guys. Make sure that you've got that security, because Lou gave it up for a ridiculous reason. He had 4 kids and me. And he kept saying, well, we have investments. Well, guess what? The investments went belly up over the years. And fortunately, I didn't have to count on that. But so many things happened. And I think it was maybe part of the financial security part too, because he had a company, or he seemed successful and then trustworthy and all these things. I never saw the red flags. I call them pink flags. But he had a plausible explanation for all the pink flags.
So I understand the feeling of wanting to do for family, because I've been like that my whole life. And sometimes even if I resent it, I still will do the right thing by family. But
I understand.
At what point does your actual family kick in and say, hey, what are you doing? What's going on? Are they aware of what's going on? Okay.
No, because when my boys, who were in their early 20s at the time, started saying, Mom, don't. I was like, I'm the adult here. Leave me alone. And I never told them what was going on. I never told anybody what was going on. And that's part of the plan too. When you said the isolation, they try to isolate you from friends and family so that you're only listening to that person.
Yeah.
And it worked. My girlfriends at the school I was working with, they knew the love story. They never knew the financials. The people at the bank, and I was a former banker. So when I would go to the bank, I was working with my manager friends. They all got drawn into the story. No one ever cautioned, say, Deb, this isn't, it was more like, when's he getting here? When is the family flying in? There was one bank that gave me a little bit of pushback, but because I'd been a banker, I went to another bank. Most people probably wouldn't do that. And that's what, my work today, it's like, let's, as a financial institution, let's give a little bit of pushback, because it's always everything, all the transactions are done so quickly and there's urgency about it. Like, get it done, get it done. I hear, today I've had women that I've worked with that have been taken in the pig butchering and the Bitcoin things. And they're actually on the phone with the scammers on their way to a Bitcoin ATM machine, is the way I talk about it. I never did that. I don't understand Bitcoin, but it happens so quickly. And when the money's gone, the money's gone. And I had one woman that was so frustrated because she kept going from machine to machine to machine that finally, in a convenience store, the store owner said, as she was so exasperated by it, he goes, I think you need to stop. I think there's a problem here. And he made her realize that she was being taken. She was just being manipulated. Hang up the phone, go home. As after $10,000 went poof out the door.
It's so incredibly difficult to understand what's happening to the individual going through this. But there's, again, as we mentioned, there's cognitive dissonance, there's all kinds of stuff going on. But with that said, at what point in your situation did you realize, okay, this guy, there's something's up here? Did that ever happen?
Yeah, it happened on the morning of September 10th, 2012, when he came on in the morning. We were early morning Yahoo chat, and he asked me how I felt about forgiveness. Now, we'd had a lot of spiritual experiences throughout those 2 years. And so I kind of put on my spiritual hat and, went into it. And we got disconnected after a while. And then I went swimming or came back or whatever. And we reconnected that afternoon. And he goes, you remember what we were talking about? And I said, yeah. He goes, let's revisit. And I'm like, what have I done? Why are we talking about forgiveness? Look, what have I done, right? And he says, I have something to tell you that's going to hurt you. At which point I'm like, well, you don't really need to do that. He says, I have a confession to make. And that really was a gut punch for me, because I'd heard that once in my 26-year marriage, and it was not a very good thing to hear. And so when he said that, I have a confession to make, he said, this has all been a scam. And I'm reading that message going, what's wrong? Are you sick? Are you in the hospital? What's happening here? I couldn't believe what he was saying at that point. And I'm like, well, now you need to prove to me that you're not lying. And that's when he said, okay, Yahoo Chat has a little camera function. And of course, I've been asking for that for 2 years, right? He goes, I'm gonna show you how to get onto this, and I'm gonna come on live. Well, imagine this. I have dual screens in my computers in my office, and I'm looking at my handsome Brit, and up pops this little camera in the side of my monitor, and I'm looking at this dark-haired, dark-eyed, dark-skinned young man with a big smile on his face. And it was like hitting a brick wall. And I'm like, now what, right? And his name was Joseph. His name wasn't Eric. He was from Nigeria, which I could tell immediately upon seeing him. But I'm thinking, it was a God moment for me that at that moment, literally, I hit a wall where what had happened for the last 2 years was not the story anymore. I realized that, and I had my phone, and I actually took a picture of my screen. I have a picture of the real guy, because he kept going on. He kept going on saying, it's great to see you, and can we keep this going on? And I'm like, are you out of your mind? I didn't have the money to do it, but why would you want that, and I asked him too. I said, why did you do this? And have you done it to other people? And he says, well, I hope you don't turn me in. And he goes, I would understand if you would. But at that point, I was thinking that if I kept him engaged, I've watched enough TV shows that the FBI can find someone like this, right? Well, that was a huge disappointment. But I kept the facade up for a little while, hoping that I would get enough information that we could find him. And they are a little more successful today because they have folks here in the States. They've got accomplices here in the States, which we can't find them here. Could never find him there, even though all the pilots in my family wanted to fly to Nigeria and go get him. I said, no, that's not going to happen. And then when I went into the FBI the next day, I had literally 4,000 pages of journal that I chronicled 2 years. I had a 3-wing binder of all the financial transactions. I had so much information. Why I did that, I have no idea, but thank goodness I did. But when the FBI saw it, they're like, Deb, first off, there's more men in Palm Beach County than women that have been taken for over $1 million. We'll never talk.
Yeah.
Second, he's out of the country and there's nothing we can do. And you've been a victim to this. And I'm like, I'm not a victim. I'm just not a victim. And you just told me there's nothing you can do. So that shut me down.
Mm-hmm.
The only God sent there was my mom and dad were with me, because unfortunately I'd gotten them involved for $100,000. When I called them after finding out that it was a scam, they immediately came over. It was like the call that I got when Lou died. They were over on the West Coast. They took care of everything. They came over the next day because they had heard about this for 2 years. And my father would tell you, and my dad's a retired dentist. You know, after a while, he's like, nobody can scam you for 2 years. How could somebody lie for 2 years? And today I just found a story that he wrote, his side of the story, which was extraordinary because my father was very thoughtful and very good with his money. But he was retired. And of all the money that I lost, it was that 100,000 that hurt me the most, because I violated their trust in me. Now, I paid it back.
Yeah.
I paid it back, but that happens too when the victim starts to, when the I'll call her a victim right now. When she starts to lose or not have access to money anymore, and the criminals know that, they're going to say, do you have any friends? Do you have any family? Do you have any business associates? Who can you get money from to help us going? Because this is going to end soon. And fortunately, I had business friends that said, nope, we can't help you. It hurt my feelings, but I'm so grateful that they didn't, but my mom and dad, bless their hearts. I mean, that hurt me the most. It hurt my heart when that happened.
And was the money for investing in some sort of business? Is that what?
No, there were tariffs there. Speaking of tariffs now, there were customs issues. There were things happening, moving the trees from Malaysia over to India. There's a lot of transport issues. And I knew some of it, but I didn't understand all of the ramifications of international trade at the time. And I Googled a lot. I Googled every time something went wrong, I would Google it. But again, and then, even working with his attorney, I knew his name. So I thought, I wrote to the licensing bureau in London, said, do you have attorney name? I can't remember his name now. I got a really lovely letter back saying, nope, we don't. I'm like, so the thing was, well, he's an international attorney. Maybe he's not affiliated with the British folks. Again, always a plausible reason why I was getting these pushbacks.
Yeah. And you were, basically you were thinking with your heart, not with your head anyway, not fully. So that happens. And, people go into this thing called limerence when they first get into a relationship that usually can wear out in a 2-year time frame.
Yeah.
Maybe go that far. So I don't think any of this is the fault of the person who's getting scammed.
No.
And I don't like it when people mock it or say, how could you do that? Because it could happen to anyone. And I want to spend some time talking about how you've turned that pain into purpose and the work that you're doing to help other people who have gone through this. Before I stopped being a matchmaker and dedicated my life to training matchmakers, I had a woman who reached out to me. She was in her 70s and she had been scammed out of a lot of money. And my heart broke for her. And because they do target people, they target widows, they target certain age groups, but there's other scams going on too. Like I said, I wrote a whole book on this and I'm going to be publishing it soon, but they get a lot of young people to share photos and videos doing sexual acts or whatever, thinking that they're in a relationship with someone, and then they scam them out of money and say, if you don't send me money, I'm going to share this with all your friends or whatever. And so there's just so many scams going on. Like I literally was researching for a long time to write this book because there's just so much going on. And it's in the billions of dollars.
Oh, absolutely.
What's reported, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I think you and I talked about that. It's only like 3 out of 100 people report. So if we see that it's already billions, multiply that by the people that are not reporting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, most don't want to because they feel so vulnerable and so ashamed of what they've done. And, you asked about turning my passion into a purpose. I did not want to talk about this initially, not at all. And I was sitting at a business meeting with some friends and they mentioned online dating. And the story is that I rolled my eyes at the one of them and she goes, "What's that about?" So I told these 4 women my story over lunch. And I said, and they said, "Deb, you've got to tell that story." I'm like, "Nope, I'm done." They said, "No, my mom was taken for 80,000, or a friend of ours was in a Ponzi scheme, not once, but twice. And then another gal was in a relationship and it turned out the guy had a family up north." And so I'm hearing all these really smart women being taken and no one's talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And over that weekend, I crafted this story about the woman behind the smile because we are all trying to look perfect. Nobody wants to have a crack. We are all the women behind the smile. Life is always fine.
Right.
And when I got through that weekend and invited them to the world premiere of The Woman Behind the Smile, they're like, it was dead silent. And they said, how do we get the ticket? I'm like, I just made that up. Oh, no. There are too many women out there. And when I realized at that point, it wasn't about me anymore. It was about the woman that was not giving me the stink eye in the front seat. It was a woman beside her that was sitting there bobbing her head saying, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start talking about this, you're going to be, if anybody talks, they'll be completely surprised at how many people this has affected. And until they know that they are not alone in this, they're not going to talk. But once they realize that it wasn't their fault, that they were expertly groomed, manipulated, and whatever, and that they are not alone, then they'll start talking. And that's the only way to recover, is to get the story out. For me, it was writing it. I published the book, The Woman Behind the Smile. Most people don't want to write it. I'm like, the weight of this whole thing will just come off your shoulders once you get it down. You don't have to show it to anybody. Just write it. Just get it out.
And I want to say again, thank you for your service, not just as a military person, but what you're doing in having these conversations and spreading the word. Because, yeah, we need to stop hiding the situation. And I think in some ways, I'll defend the fact that law enforcement doesn't really do much. Most of this stuff is not criminal because you're out of your own volition taking money out of your accounts and doing whatever, and so they get away with this stuff. But they do also groom people into committing more crimes on their behalf, like the story you started to say before. And so that's the sad part, that nobody's going after this unless I'm wrong.
Well, they're trying, but it's very difficult and to take someone to justice that's across the pond.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult. You try to work with the governments over there, but so many of them are corrupt too that's not going to happen.
Right.
Law enforcement here is trying to do their best. FBI at the beginning was not such a help. Where I changed my thought about that was when I was actually in a courtroom in Dallas with a woman that I was working with, and she was giving a victim's advocate statement to the judge, and the forensic scientists, basically the FBI forensic peoples, had done such an excellent job in their 88 victims. Only one showed up, but they had ring video of, the scammer had used his neighbor's home to have packages delivered, and they would get over there before she got home. But all that was on a ring video, the ring doorbell.
Yeah, thank God for cameras these days.
Or, these guys are getting a lot of cash, and so they're taking videos on their phone so they can send it back to the guys overseas saying, look, and they're counting money. So the evidence was there, but it was all compiled by the FBI and Secret Service. And so all those are working together, but there's a certain threshold, dollar money. You got to have over $100,000 that you lost, or whatever their
Oh my gosh.
threshold is now. So a lot of people don't qualify, but it could be $1, it could be $2 million. It doesn't matter. You've still been a victim to this crime. And we have to change it. It's not a scam. It is a crime. It's financial fraud. Right. And law enforcement understands fraud. They don't understand romance scams, or dating scams, but they understand fraud. The law understands fraud. Again, they have to have a certain dollar amount that it's worth them to pursue, because they just can't go after anybody. But it's a little bit easier if the people are here in the States, but it's still very difficult. And especially if no one wants to talk up and tell their story, because then it'll never, ever get into court if you don't tell.
Right. Well, and even if you just talk about it just to help other people avoid the situation, because what happens to you doesn't have to happen to somebody else, and that is a gift in and of itself. Like the fact that you talk about this is so important. I don't remember if it was a movie or something where they actually had people that were human trafficked and sitting in these rooms and being forced to do this work.
Right. That's in the Far East. I think it's in Myanmar. It's over there. It's like call centers where they've been enticed to come to work to get money, and then they get it. It's basically imprisoned, where they are working as slaves to this kind of work. Yeah, it's psychologically damaging. The whole thing is just psychologically damaging, from the victim to, and actually, Dr. McGinnis, who's the founder of SCARS, was working with a team in Ghana at the universities to show how this is even affecting the scammers, because many of them are college students, and the ramifications of this over time psychologically on them, it's going to hurt. And not that I'm not excusing what they're doing, because there's no excuse for what they're doing. But it is damaging on that end. But it's psychological. It's trauma for any victim. And if they don't address it, that trauma is going to stick with them, and they will never get over it. And like you said, the worst thing will happen is that they will commit suicide. And that happens quite frequently. Because you've lost your home, you lost your finances, you lost your friends, your family, and all this, and you're so desperate, like, what do I do now? And no one's listening to you. The bankers are shutting down your accounts. The law enforcement's laughing at you. What do you do? Where do you go? And you could be 65, 70, 75 years old, and you just feel like, I can never make this back. I have no more money. Let's just, we're done. And it happens, and that is so sad. And like you mentioned earlier, it's happening to teenagers, teenage boys. We've seen this extortion stuff where the kids commit suicide because they just feel like their life is over.
Yeah. It's sad.
It's sad. It's ruining families, ruining communities, ruining everybody. And, the work that I'm doing now is not just working with the victims, but working with financial institutions. As a former banker, I'm like, you guys have great technology. You don't know how to talk with someone that's lost their money. Because you go in there and saying, well, you're being scammed, and you don't. It's that whole don't. You're gonna lose. Either that client is going to go to another bank where you now have lost a customer, or you've just shut them down emotionally, and they realize that nobody can help them now, and they have no access to money. They have no access to moving forward, and that leads to things that we don't.
Yeah, back to. And this is happening to widows, widowers, lonely people, which there's a loneliness
happens to everybody.
Yeah. So let's talk about the work that you're doing. You're working with SCARS.
Yeah, SCARS is the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. We were doing support groups. Support groups are very difficult, even like addiction groups. Everybody thinks that they're fixed after a few months. Well, until you understand exactly what has happened to you and why, what made you susceptible to that. And everybody, regardless of age, religion, background, culture, you name it, everybody is susceptible to scammers at some point in their lifetime. Everybody, it's because I'll have people say, oh, it never happened to me. I'm like, I hope it doesn't. But what if it were to happen to your mother or your daughter, or your son, your husband? I can't tell you how many married couples we've had to work with, because the women might have been on Words with Friends. They're not on a dating site. They're on a gaming site. These criminals are everywhere. And they are just It's phishing. They're out there. They don't need $1 million client. They need 1 million people that are going to lose $250.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
it.
going to happen. It's going to happen. So what SCARS does right now, we actually have an institute. It's called the SCARS. The SCARS, I've got it all here. There's so many great things that SCARS is doing. Is scarseducation.org is one of the websites. Romance Scams Now is like an encyclopedia of all the information that you'd want to know about relationship scams, not just romance, but relationships. And all of these are relationships. They're just an incredible thing. So we're trying to get the education out there, and we've got a course that is self-paced that will explain A to Z what happened to you and what you can expect going forward, how to report, how to go into a police department and not be this blubbering, I don't want to say idiot, but you have to get your stuff together or you will not be taken seriously.
Right.
There are certain things that we want you to take seriously and how to help yourself get control over one thing, your emotions at first, but get control over your finances because it's devastating, especially if you're on a fixed income now and you've given everything away. How do you recover? And it happens by understanding, number one, you're not alone. It happens to a lot of people and that it was not your fault.
And are you doing a lot of work to avoid this from happening, to bring awareness? And I know that's hard, but there's a lot of signs of things that, like the love bombing, the immediate terms of endearment, all of a sudden they had a situation where they need you to desperately send them money, all that kind of stuff. I think I don't want people to be cynical, but to be cautious, like get in your head before you get into your heart, especially if you haven't met someone or even seen them physically or gone on a video date or something. So are you doing work to like give people information on how to avoid it instead of
We are, but prevention is very difficult. Even think about my dad's a dentist, right? Former dentist.
mm-hmm.
Nobody wanted to floss their teeth before they got a cavity until they got a cavity. And that's like, shoot, nobody wants prevention because when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. You're going to tune them out. Where I find the prevention works best is like if I have a friend who I see things happening to, I can say, oh, that sounds really familiar. That sounds like we need to be careful. I think everybody needs a dating buddy.
Yes, I love
said at the beginning that I was a widow, which I was, but I've remarried. And I met my spouse, my Christopher, through a matchmaker. So I have a great love of matchmakers. I think there's a great place for them. But we can't dismiss our feelings because when we're in the middle of it, because you go in thinking that it's true, that it's real, there aren't any public service announcements on Match.com or any of these things saying, be careful, be careful. And I think it starts there.
Agreed. 100%.
They are off the hook with liability. And I find that wrong. But that's the way it is. So we can get the word out there, but until no one's going to look me up until they've been taken.
Yeah, that's a sad reality. And yeah, the online space is starting to do, well, at least have a lot of conversations and about what they think they might do. But, for them, they want as many profiles on there. They want to keep people engaged so that they can get their subscription money.
Right.
And that's the sad part. But I love, and thank you for bringing up the fact that you met your now spouse through a matchmaker, because I'm always a proponent of, look, if you're not going to do the due diligence and actually figure out who you're dealing with, and just be very, like, you don't want to go into, even you meet someone online and you don't want to interrogate them, right? But a matchmaker does. That's what matchmakers do. They interrogate, they do background checks to the extent that they can, because there's no real good foolproof background check unless you hire a detective. But they do the due diligence, they find them online, they do a bunch of stuff. And they're also asking questions about the things that their client wants. So if you have any particulars, I can, as if I'm a matchmaker, I could ask all of those questions that you don't get to do when you're dating. You have to take it easy. You can't come in guns blazing. It's like, all right, I want to know this and I want to know that, And so I tell people, like, it's a really good investment of meeting the right people. Now, they can't guarantee you're going to have success, you're going to have a marriage or whatever. All they can do is, do the due diligence for you and vet the people and actually bring them forward. Only those people who are qualified, because right now I can't think of a better way to, I did write this book, which I was showing you my manuscript. I keep telling, I think we spoke, I don't know how many months ago, and I'm like, I wrote this book, but I am going to get it published, and I'm going to self-publish, just because it breaks my heart every time I hear a story like this.
Yeah.
And it's going to keep happening. To your point, the prevention part is not easy, because people dive in and they have a need. They're either feeling lonely or whatever. You're online for a reason. You want to meet someone. And I know I was online and I met my husband that way.
But it changes. It's really interesting, because by the time you get your book published, they will have come out with whatever way they can make money, they're going to do it. The pig butchering thing, Tim and I were talking about it a year ago, and now it's this huge investment thing, and people, pig butchering. I'm like, it's taking the financial part of like investing and intermingling it with a little bit of, relationship, love, and all this and then, like, let me teach you how to invest. You invest, you're doing well, and all of a sudden it's pulled right out from underneath you. Well, the victims of that are extraordinarily angry. So that's another reason why victims aren't going to speak up, because they're angry. They're in that revenge. How can I get them back? How can I, let me look at pictures. Well, looking at pictures of scammers online is like looking at mugshots. It's mentally devastating for you. Why do that? If somebody wants to see a picture of a scammer, look at my website. There's a picture of the guy, the actual guy, and many of them look just like him. That's shouldn't be saying that, but that's what it is. Everybody needs. I was very fortunate, looking back, to have had him confess in person and show me his picture. Right. Because if he had just disappeared, it would have been like my husband Lou walking out the door, dying, and never seeing him again.
No closure. Yeah.
And now I'm $1 million out, So for me, it was closure. Most people don't get that. And the scammers are getting very aggressive now, because if you run out of money and you don't want, maybe you're going to become a money mule, which now makes you complicit, which now makes you, someone that the police are going to pick up themselves, until you can show that you've reported it. But they pull you in whatever way they can. And because you don't believe that you would be taken, again, I would never be taken. Yeah, right. You're going to be taken, and you're going to get pulled into it. And then it's going to be beyond you, and you can't recover. And you need to know, though, that recovery is not easy. It's something that's going to take some time. But how much time did you spend in the scam? And that's what we tell folks too, is once you've ended it, if you've really ended it, you've got to fill your time with something productive. And that's why the Scars Institute is so good, and people say, there's too much information. I'm like, but how much time were you spending online during the relationship?
Right.
Like 4 or 5 hours a day at night. You have to do something. Otherwise your brain is going to have this void. Your heart's going to have this void, and it's going to get sucked back in there. And the recidivism part of a scam is huge, because
really,
because you've had that love bombing and all that emotional stuff, and then all of a sudden it's over with. Well, then you think, I've learned. Well, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, you're thinking you're being safe again. You get contacted by somebody else, couldn't possibly be a scammer. Bam, you're back in it.
Oh my God. Well, that is a news flash for me. I had no idea that people went through that same experience over and over again. I guess it makes sense, because, when you get married, I don't know why I'm making this correlation, but when you get married, you have like a 50% chance of getting divorced. When you remarry, it goes up into the 60s, and the third time is in the 70s. So it's like you just keep repeating. I guess humans have patterns, and we just keep doing the same stupid shit over and over again.
We want the connection, Right. You think, that couldn't possibly be taken the second time, because I know all the signs. Well, you don't. The signs change, and you change too. Your heart changes a little bit. So the tactic might have changed, but it's still there. You still want that relationship. We never, I look back, and I met CJ relatively quickly after the scam was revealed, but he was so good for me, and he was in person. But we don't really encourage the women in the support groups to start dating right off the bat. It's like, you need to get a control of yourself.
Regain your sense of self. Absolutely.
Yeah, and feel good about yourself and not rely on anybody else there. So it's, I'll get to the numbers on the repeats, but for me, I didn't have a repeat, but there could be someone that's had 10. You get
Oh my God.
some of
No.
these older guys too, and it's not just the men that get the repeat, but the old men, they think that it's that white knight syndrome where they're taking care of somebody. They want to be there for someone.
Mhm.
And the woman is really lovely picture wise now with AI and stuff. You never know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting how people can be taken multiple times. And after a while, if they're not going to disengage, we at Scars can't help anybody that's not going to take it seriously and disengage. And we don't work with everybody. You have to work with us. You have to be willing to understand what happened and take some real, if somebody contacts me, they have given me now the ability to speak frankly with them and say, this is what I feel, because I can feel it. When someone tells me what's going on, I can feel it, that spidey sense. I said, listen to me. You don't want to go through this anymore. But I can't make them. Everybody's got free agency and choice. We can, like the prevention, we can get the word out there, but by the time someone needs what we're doing, they're already in it.
Yeah.
And if you can't stop within the first 2 weeks, you're in till you crash and burn. And that's sad to say, because it's very difficult once you've been hooked to stop it, because you don't see that it's happening, and you're not listening to anybody that's on the outside, and you're in it till the end.
What does healing look like? Someone who's gone through this experience, you yourself have gone through it. What does healing look like?
Not thinking about what happened all the time.
Mm.
Because originally you'll be just devastated by the finances, and until you can rewrite your story, or what's the word? You have to be realistic. Let's say this, realistic with what's happening now, and understand that your life is going to be different than you planned before this took place.
Mm-hmm.
And what can you do? I've got 65, 70-year-old women that are getting jobs again.
Mm.
It's going to happen. I always said to my last suit has no pockets. I was never going to take that money with me, but it would sure be nice to leave it to my grandkids. Well, I've had time, fortunately, and a wonderful husband to be able to make good again. Most people won't, especially if they blame themselves for what happened, because they get caught in that lack mentality. Yeah. I don't have this, I don't have that. Well, if you keep thinking that, you're never going to get it. You and I were talking about Mel Robbins. I was on the Mel Robbins show. I love her podcast. I watch everything about, exercise now, and what I can do in my 60s, so that when I'm my dad's age at 95, I'm still active and smart and all these things. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of self-help that we can do, that we have to do to make ourselves strong before we put ourselves out there for somebody else. And that's when you've really recovered, you understand who you are, what happened, how you're not going to let that happen again, hopefully. And the women that have really recovered the most are the ones that are in it to help others now, understanding that we can't change anybody from what they're doing. We can't stop them, but we can encourage them to listen to what we have to say and to be a volunteer to help others going forward.
That's so beautiful, and it's so true. I think in almost everything, when you're helping others, you kind of get out of your own victimhood. You forget about that, and you're focused on, there's something about helping others that actually helps you psychologically and in every way. And I love the work that you're doing, and I'm so grateful that you came on the show. We talked a few months back, and we have so many cool things in common. How would you like people to get a hold of you and to get started with working with you and the work that you're doing, or reading your whole manifesto of the woman behind the smile? I think there's a website, right?
There is a website. It's called The Woman Behind the Smile. if somebody, and I will respond to people if they write to me at Debby, Debby, at the woman behind the smile. I will particularly pay attention to the victims or the victims' families. I can't spend all my time doing that because I will move you forward to scars and to, go to romancescamsnow.com or to scamsurvivors.org. Go to the Institute, look up the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, look at the videos that we've done. Stay away from looking at pictures of scammers. That is not going to help you. Stay away from some of you got to be really careful too, because if you've been taken by one, then the next scam is like, there's a detective or somebody that reaches out to you, or they're going to prove to you that this has been, well, it's a scam too.
Yeah.
So just be really, really diligent and be realistic that what happened. It's in your past. You can't change it, but look forward to something better and take it one step at a time. So go to the woman behind the smile. I do have scars information there also, but you'll see my story and you'll see some of the interviews that we've done. I in the past, I had a podcast called Stand Up and Speak Up. I loved it. I love what you're doing too. It just took up a lot of my time. And so a lot of my work today is with my dad. My mom passed away this past year. So it's with my dad and working with my dad, and finding value in what I can. I can't do everything for everybody. None of us can. You have to learn to say no. I wish I'd learned to say that before the scam, but I can't go back now. I can't go back and say, I wish it didn't happen, because I'm a completely different person and my purpose and passion is taking a 180. And my joy comes from being there when a woman comes to me and says, I'm so glad I read your book. Or I hate it when they come and say, I wish I'd read your book before. I said, okay, so you're beyond it now. What can you do now to help one other person? Because you're going to have a friend that you're going to hear them start talking about something. It's going to be like, oh, that really rings true, that something's going on there. And I heard Deb's story, or I heard someone's story. And what can I do to help my friend now? Gently, So we actually do train. We help train. I love working with the financial institutions. I'm actually going up to Washington next week at a summit to say, look, guys, you got to get beyond the technology. You know how to tell a transaction's fake.
Right.
How can you help your clients going forward now? What is the best thing for you to help the victims or the survivors of this go forward? And that's what I really love to do, is try to give them an idea, because
I love it. I love that you're coming at every angle. It's not just the victim. It's not just, the technology. It's also the bankers and everything else. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. We'll be sure to share all your contact details on the show notes. And Debbie, thank you so much. This is
thank you, Arlene, because we can't at SCARS do this by ourselves. We need people that are really willing to not blame the victim and say, look, this is happening. What can we do to support families, particularly because, you look back at the woman who lost her life. Her kids were like, what happened? What do we do? We're not getting any help from law enforcement or the FBI. What do we do? They need to know how they can move forward. And hopefully someone will hear this and say, oh, maybe this is happening to me. Maybe I better stop. We can only hope.
I hope so. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Have you ever felt called to help others find love? You might have the heart for matchmaking, but without the right training, turning that passion into a thriving business can feel impossible. Most matchmaking courses give you outdated theories and a certificate, but no real-world strategy to build a successful business. That's where Love Pro Mastermind Academy is different. Our live Done With You training goes beyond theory, helping you develop matchmaking expertise, implement sales and marketing strategies, and master the art of client success. With expert-led instruction, accountability, and a community of like-minded professionals, you'll learn how to identify your niche, attract high-quality clients, create a seamless matchmaking process, grow a sustainable, profitable business. With over a decade of experience, we don't just train matchmakers, we create leaders in the industry. Are you ready to become an LPMA certified matchmaker and build a business that changes lives? Apply today at lovepromastermind.com.
Thank you for tuning in to the Matchmaker Mentor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow matchmakers and friends. For more resources, training, and inspiration, visit lovepromastermind.com and follow us on social media. Remember, matchmaking isn't just a career, it's a calling. Let's keep building connections, changing lives, and growing together. Until next time, stay inspired and keep matching.